Hey everyone, welcome to Balanced Bodybuilding Radio. I am your host, Lee Marie. I am a Glam Girl bikini coach and an NPC bikini competitor, and I am here with my coach and my co-host.
Hey guys, Amy Enger, founder and CEO of Glam Girl Bikini.
So, if you listened to last week's episode, we talked about what is the best way to diet. So, we covered three of the most popular methods that people use to, follow some sort of an eating plan, and that is to follow a meal plan or to do flexible dieting, which is counting calories or counting macros, or to practice intuitive eating. And so then we asked for listener questions, and you all were amazing and gave us lots of questions. So we're just going to dive right into all of your diet and food related questions here. So we can kind of bounce back and forth on these questions, Amy. I'll go with the first one, and it is from Shelly. And Shelly asks, what is the difference between tracking carbs or tracking net carbs? And what do you recommend for someone trying to lose weight?
Yeah, so I think that with net carbs, you need to treat it like how diabetics treat it or how my endocrinologist always said, there are no such thing as net carbs when it comes to like blood sugar and things like that. So basically a net carb, you're subtracting the fiber um, that's in the carb and kind of like taking the net carbs after that. So the thing about fiber, it's really tricky. Some people digest it differently and absorb a different amount of nutrients than others. So it's very much impossible to have an accurate calculation of the carbs that you're consuming if you're not counting the total carbs.
Mm-hmm.
So on MyFitnessPal, it kind of annoys me that they have a default mode where if you don't know about it, it defaults to net carbs.
Wow.
So I'll have a lot of clients that think like they have so many carbs
Mhm.
that they can eat, and it's because their MyFitnessPal is defaulted to the net carbs. So it's giving them basically all those carbs back that are fibrous. Um, and I mean, you have to even count vegetables as a carb. That's just the reality of it. Um, so if you're trying to lose weight, then the more accurate your deficit, the better. And so therefore, net carbs would be inappropriate for that factor.
And I think the way that you get by with like the difference too is most of us, or at least we have our athletes track their fiber as well. So you are
Mhm.
counting and you are tracking your fiber. And so you're tracking the carbs that, are low in fiber, and you're making sure that you have enough carbs that are higher in fiber because you have that fiber goal. And
Mhm.
then I just wanted to point out too that net carbs is kind of a diet buzzword. So I love
Mhm.
this question because if you're looking at something like certain protein bars will have
Mhm.
fiber in them on purpose so that they can put on their package only 2 grams net carbs. And if you don't understand the difference between total carbs and net carbs, you're going to think, oh, I can eat this protein bar, it's only got 2 carbs in it, that's crazy, and it's got 20 grams of protein, this is perfect. But when you look at the back, it's usually something like, closer to 18 carbs or something like that, and then they just put a lot of fiber in there, so that they can put that on the package. So just make sure that you're keeping that in mind when you're looking at carbs. Like turn it over, look at the nutrition label, because they will list the total carbs, and then they'll list the fiber, and then they'll list the net carbs too.
Yeah, another thing to note on that too is just they'll count sugar alcohols not as much as because some people again digest sugar alcohols differently. So some absorb all of the carbs, some absorb like a small percentage of the ones that are in sugar alcohols. So you can't just say because you're adding these sugar alcohols that those carbs don't count because they do for some people. Um,
They all
because
count.
everyone's digestion's different. So I know Shelly, and my client gave us a bunch of good questions, but um, let's actually go up to my other client, Kim Richards. She had asked if we track lettuce,
Mhm.
and if so, how do you weigh and measure it, and maybe possibly address all vegetables? So very similar to why we track net carbs, and we don't do net carbs. We track all carbs. Lettuce has carbs in it and it's a vegetable. It has very little calories, very little carbs, but if you're trying to be the most accurate you can when it comes to dieting and especially getting lean for a stage, you have to count all of those carbs always. So, there's certain instances where, some coaches may say, okay, here's a list of vegetables that are considered like free foods.
Mhm.
I do that when people are in an improvement season, but they've just come off of a show and they're super hungry. So I'll just say, like cucumber, spinach, celery, lettuce, just don't count those. Put those in your foods for volume. Don't count them.
Mhm.
But if we're trying to get down to the nitty gritty body fat percentage that's super stage lean, we need to even account for lettuce.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I think lifestyle and improvement season are definitely different, but I do think it's helpful to track your vegetables anyways, just to learn the different carbs in different vegetables and also
mhm.
protein. Some vegetables are pretty high in protein, and
Yeah.
sometimes I've avoided things like broccoli because it'll push me over on my protein. So just to know, like, have that knowledge of which vegetables are higher in carbs and which ones are lower, I think
Mhm.
is helpful too.
Yeah, because then you get into the parts where like carrots are higher in carbs than most fruits,
Mhm.
and Brussels sprouts are pretty high in carbs. And I mean, those are a green vegetable, and they're just not as comparable to like lettuce. There's a big difference in the amount of carbs that's in a Brussels sprout versus a piece of lettuce.
Mhm.
So yeah, you're getting into that, and then you can just go into starchy carbs like corn and peas. Those have very high carb content,
Yep.
butternut squash. So you kind of have to be strategic about those too because they can add up pretty quickly.
But they'll also be more filling too. And so it's not
Mhm.
bad to eat vegetables that are high
No.
in carbs. I love it. I still think like I can eat a lot more volume having squash than having like rice or bread
Hmm.
or something like that too. So
Yeah.
I really have it, but just be aware of it.
Yeah.
That's higher in carbs. Okay, so I'm so glad you caught that question because I missed it. Okay, so we have another one from Shelly. What are some methods you have used to address plateaus when clients seem to be following the plan to a T? So plateau would mean your weight is not moving or your measurements are not moving. So what are some methods you use, Amy, with that?
Yeah. So low hanging fruit is just kind of looking for reasons why there may be a stall in weight loss, whether that's a hormonal shift, something with sleep, stress, bowel movements. Those can be some reasons for stalls that has nothing to do with the caloric deficit. Sometimes we need to push through that plateau by, making an adjustment to their macros. Maybe, their ratios are off in terms of the percentage of carbs and fats and protein. Sometimes they're just eating maintenance calories at that point and they need to go a little bit lower in their deficit. Sometimes it works like if you do carb cycling or like a rapid fat loss phase, all these different things. There's so many different tools in the toolbox. It's very person to person dependent on the situation. And it's not just like there's a one answer to anything as per usual, because everyone's so unique.
Yep, for
Yeah.
sure. I think it all boils down to if you're not losing weight for long enough, first of all, make sure you're actually in a plateau because you don't
Hmm.
necessarily lose weight in this perfect order and it's, day by
Hmm.
day. You don't usually lose weight day by day or sometimes not even week by week. So sometimes you just have to go
Yeah.
longer in your deficit.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you're not in a calorie deficit, then you need to start looking at those little things like, are you tracking the lettuce? Are
Yeah.
you tracking all the vegetables? What about your steps? That's a huge one for me. If I
Hmm.
don't track my steps, and then I start increasing them or something like that, or I'm not hitting my step goal because I'm more tired because I'm in a calorie deficit, that's a huge one. So tracking your
Hmm.
activity and just making sure all of those little factors, which is why it's great to have a coach that can kind of start pinpointing, let's try this before we, do another calorie cut again or something like that.
Yeah. Or if like people are on the road or they're on vacation, like they're out of their elements, there's certain things that they may be like not really realizing that they're not being as accurate with measurements or maybe they had to like go to a restaurant and like the chicken had some oil in it that they didn't know about, or some added sugars, or there's so many different things. So I think it's good too to do a diary check at times as well and see, where the client's hitting those numbers as well. Because sometimes they just don't realize how granular you have to look at it. I mean, maybe they're adding ketchup or they're drinking a beverage that isn't actually 0 calories. So there's just like so many different variables that can be playing in a part of that.
Yeah, a couple of things to check too with if you're tracking on MyFitnessPal, and let's say you scan something like a barcode of something, it could be
Mhm.
automatically inputting the net carbs instead of the total carbs. Or
Yep.
sometimes your MyFitnessPal might be adding in your exercise calories if you have it linked to your watch or something like that. And so your
Mhm.
coach will have already accounted for those, so you don't need to double add them in. So just little things like that as well.
Definitely. Yeah, I think she also asked about how do you decide for refeeds and how do you plan for and calculate those and integrate those into meal plans. Again, it so depends on the client and the situation. So if I'm implementing a refeed, typically I'm either seeing the person where they're dropping weight at too rapid of a rate, where we do a calorie adjustment 1 week, it's still not enough, they're still losing weight very rapidly, so I'll put in, you know one of my clients, she keeps losing weight and I keep adding calories, so I gave her a double refeed this week, and the week before I had given her one refeed. And so these are tools that we can use to kind of, especially if they have a very stoked metabolism, that we can utilize as a coach. I always find too that it can get somebody out of a plateau, because sometimes the stress of dieting is actually what makes cortisol really high. And sometimes they just need that release, with like a little bit of a calorie bump, a little bit of like a diet break in a way with that meal. And sometimes that's enough to break the cortisol so that the inflammation comes down from dieting. And it's enough to kind of have a big drop after a refeed. I've seen that happen when someone's very hardcore following things to a T. Other things that I've found that they're useful for is just like social situations. If we need something calculated where, you know, we can figure it out into the overall deficit for the week, but give them some numbers. So, like they can go out for their anniversary dinner or out for like a birthday dinner, but still stay within their goals and keeping their deficit with that factored in. So maybe it means like throughout the week, they're a little bit lower on their deficit so they can have that calorie bump. Or, some people just need the carbs for recovery. So after like a hard leg day, it can be something that you can incorporate. But, it's just so person dependent. It'd be hard for me to give any sort of examples in terms of like numbers that I use or other things like that. What are your thoughts?
I think for speaking specifically to lifestyle, so for a
Mhm.
lifestyle competitor, I think mentally we're more thinking the mental break with lifestyle
Yeah.
and the ability to stay consistent. So I think
Mhm.
if you're working with a client who is on a plan and then she goes on vacation and just goes off the plan, it's going to be harder for her mentally. She's going to be really hard on herself. And then it's going to be harder to get back on track because you think, oh, I've ruined all my progress, or,
Mhm.
I've wrecked my momentum. It's just, I've been struggling to get back on. Versus if you actually have her plan, even if it's like, okay, it's, the 4th of July, I want you to, hit your protein throughout the day, hit your water throughout the day, and then I want you to have a free meal. Like
Mhm.
even actually going that far and not having them track, I think if it was somebody in a competition, or even in the improvement season, they're used to tracking, I would definitely have them track. But for lifestyle, then it kind of gives them more freedom. And it's like it's already on their plan. So they're still
Mhm.
following their plan. And then it's easy to just go right back on to. I've actually told people, because I've had clients that are so strict and so hard on themselves. I've said, okay, I want you to not track this meal. Like, because I know them individually, it's going to be like, that's going to be a win for them to be able to have a
Mhm.
meal that is not tracked and then get right back on it and not just blow the rest of their week. So it really does depend on the client, but I
Mhm.
think it's really good, especially for celebrations or holidays or vacations, things like that, to just give them that mental break, but have it still be in their plan so that you still feel successful and you can jump right back in, because it's really all about
Yeah.
consistency.
Yeah, it just gives them a little bit more longevity in the game. And I feel like that's too with people deep in the improvement season. They need those free meals just to have longevity and to get a break from tracking because that gets exhausting. I mean, let's be honest. It's if you, especially if you don't have an immediate goal where you have to be like stage lean, it can be cumbersome doing that over the long term.
Yeah. Even when your macros get high in the improvement season, but you're still tracking everything so meticulously, you feel like
Hmm.
you're always in a diet.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so just have that mental break helps
Hmm.
for sure.
Definitely.
Okay, so Mona Lee, this is my mom. She asked us a few
Ooh.
questions. So the first one is, where does popcorn fit? And I love this because I grew up eating
Okay.
popcorn. It was like our favorite snack. And we always make it homemade. We've had an air popper, and then we also make it on the stove top with like oil and stuff.
Uh-huh.
But I think she's talking about where it fits in your macros. So popcorn in itself is a carb. And then it can be pretty high in fiber. And I think if you do air popped popcorn, it can be pretty low in fat as well. And actually, for
Uh-huh.
the volume that you get as a snack, it's pretty good. But you got to watch, because the biggest thing I think with popcorn is adding the oil and the butter, which really causes the calories to spike. And unless you're having like packaged, it's hard to actually accurately track it. So if you're trying to lose weight, I would recommend doing the air popped or getting a brand like Skinny Pop popcorn or something like that, and then either measuring it out or just getting the individual bags. But it can actually be like really macro friendly as long as you're tracking your macros. You just make it fit. So the
Hmm.
answer to pretty much how does this fit, fill in the blank, is you make it fit within
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
budget. So it might, depending on your budget of calories, it might fit once a week. It might fit a few times a week. It might be a once a month thing. You know, it also depends on if you're going to the movie theater, that's a whole different level of calories and fat and things like that.
Yeah.
And you know how heavy handed they are with the butter and things like that too. But if you're looking to kind of keep it tight and look for a macro friendly snack, anything like those Skinny Pop popcorn bags, or doing an air popped popcorn situation, doing some salt on there, and then make it, you know, put it into your carbs, track it as your carbs.
Yeah, I just put this on one of my clients. She's just beginning and she's lifestyle and she requested popcorn and she's like, I want the lesser evil popcorn. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna figure out how to get you this. And so we have like 3 cups of popcorn in her thing, but it's just you just have to take the time to calculate it and just put it in my fitness pal. Or you can be like Drea, where when she goes to the movies, when she's in prep, she breaks apart bunch of rice cakes and salts them
Yep.
and eats
So
them like
great.
popcorn.
So good.
So
Yes.
yeah, it's a really easy way to do that. I use those as croutons sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
sprinkle them on top of my salad.
Yes. So good.
Really low carb that way. Okay, so she talked about the free moments. I think we kind of covered that one.
Yeah. She asked, is it good to intentionally have free days or free moments?
Hmm.
I think we kind of, yeah, we did talk about how to do refeeds. That's like a calculated free meal, or a lifestyle, giving someone a free meal. I tend to stay away from free days, just because we really, I think, underestimate the amount of calories we can eat in a day. And you
Hmm.
could actually, if you figured out your calorie deficit for the entire week, you could eat that back easily in a whole day and put yourself out of it, like out of a deficit for the whole entire week. And you
Hmm.
just have to kind of ask yourself, is it really worth it to diet for a whole week and then have one day that erases all my work? Versus
Yeah.
if you have like a treat, but you stuck to your macros all day, and then you
Mhm.
had that treat and still made progress, most of us are going to enjoy that just as much. So that
Yeah.
would be my take on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then she asks, does it usually work to start with a coach and then wean off, or does it seem to work better to just keep checking in or checking in occasionally? So my thoughts on this is I've had a coach since day one. That was 12 years ago, or maybe longer. And I really haven't gone like a month or two without a coach. And I need accountability. I can do everything myself. I know how to do it. I've coached people doing this stuff all the time, but I need someone to take care of me and to, for me to like feel like I'm taken care of, because that's really important so that I can best take care of other people. And I find that when I do have a coach, um, I don't think, for me, I will always find, like, with my clients, there's always like a different goal that you can get to, so even if you feel like you're to a point where you've learned so much from a coach, I feel like there's always the next step goal, something higher level that you can choose to do next to better yourself and make improvements. That's like the beauty of this sport, especially, is just always leveling up. So I personally feel like there's never a time where you really need to not have a coach, in my personal opinion. But I mean, I know I am a coach, so that sounds like a biased response, but there, I have done it myself too, so I can't really say any different than that. So,
Yeah, and I think talking for lifestyle, I think a lot of us just it's constantly in our brains from I think diet culture in the industry
mhm.
that it's losing weight is a phase and then you go back to regular life. And so
Yeah,
the same thing with a coach. It's like, well, I'll hire a coach to hit this goal and then I'll just go back to regular life. Now, I want to point out that there are people who are very disciplined. Myself, I am one of those people. So I can hold myself to very high standards and maintain discipline without a coach. But what I love is I know that a coach is going to push me to level up constantly and is going to call out a higher potential in me than I might call it in myself. So I
hmm,
always know that I'm going to do better because a coach is going to believe that I can achieve things that I don't believe yet. And when a coach says, "Oh no, you can totally do this," then my mindset changes to, "Oh no, I can totally do this." So what I love about having a coach is someone that actually sees greater potential in me and pushes me to keep progressing. Um,
hmm,
but I think a lot of people need the accountability and they need the discipline. But the cool thing is with a coach, when you find someone that you really connect with, you get both. And so I love having a coach that just constantly pours into me and encourages me and hypes me up but sees the greater potential in me and calls that out. And I think that's something that's underestimated in having a coach with if you're not competing or something,
yeah,
that's really beneficial.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, Rachel McGraw says, how do you know it's time to try and switch to intuitive eating?
I
So
love
we kind of talked about this last episode, and I think it's a different animal.
that.
Um, I think that it's a healthy place to be. Um, if you are in a good place mentally with food, your relationship with food, your body image, and you have the tools to know, like, how to get variety in your diet, how to get enough protein, all of those things. I think that's where you have to be. It has to be that perfect window of where you're ready for that.
Yeah,
So,
I definitely would say there's a few things that should be in place. First of all, like what you
mhm,
did, so you should have a season of tracking, tracking the foods that you eat and documenting or at least just acknowledging how they make your body feel, as well. And
mhm.
then you should not be in prep for a competition. So
Yeah.
not be, actively, that is not the time to practice intuitive eating. And then also, I would say you should wait until you are going into maintenance and even spend some time in maintenance, meaning you're at a body weight that you feel
Mhm.
comfortable with. Spend some time getting your calories back up to maintenance and then tracking at maintenance. So you really are aware of what maintenance is for you. And then if you want to try and transition into intuitive eating, you could try doing something like tracking your meals 6 days a week and having one intuitive day. And then, maybe you go try that for a couple of weeks, your weight stays the same. Maybe you have 2 intuitive days or something like that and kind of ease into it. And then once you're kind of fully into intuitive eating and you're maintaining your weight, I would still track, a few days a month just to make sure you are hitting the protein, hitting the fibers, getting in all of the nutrients that you need as well. So
Yeah.
that's my advice on that.
Yeah. I like the Pareto principle where you're doing like an 80/20.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
a couple of
I love
days a week.
that. Okay, so Mel Kenner, my girl Mel, has a true or false question. I love this question. Okay. So true or false, you should cut out carbs when you start a diet. I know I personally used to try to avoid carbs like bread or potatoes when I would try to start a diet. I think, first of all, that's false.
Yeah.
Um,
It's gonna say.
if you're going to be in a diet, the number one rule for, adjusting your weight up or down is the calories. So your energy intake needs to, if you're doing a diet, meaning you're trying to lose weight, you have to know how many calories that you need to eat to lose weight. And then you have to be sure that you're eating that many calories. So you have to track your food. You have to be weighing and measuring. You can't be sneaking little things here and there that could put you out of that diet. So it doesn't have anything to do with carbs. It has to do with calories. But cutting out carbs is an easy way to see quick loss on the scale because of like carbohydrates, they hydrate you, so they do cause you to retain water. And so if you cut out a whole bunch of carbs, you're not only cutting out a bunch of calories, you're also pulling a bunch of water from your muscles. And then what I think a lot of people think of when they think carbs, they're not thinking accurately like vegetables and fruits and even nut butters. If you cut out all carbs, you're basically eating meat and then like oils and like maybe clarified butter. Do you think of anything else that doesn't have any carbs in it?
Well, it's funny because the body actually is super smart that it will convert protein into sugars.
Yeah.
So even protein can get
Yeah.
converted.
You need carbs.
Your brain has to have glucose to survive, period.
Yeah.
So if you're not in full ketosis where you're getting too much protein and not like 90% to 80% fat where you're making actual ketones, your brain is going to convert that protein into glucose. So through gluconeogenesis. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I would say, actually, I know this is a shameless plug for our other podcast, but we just did a podcast on insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance. So I think, I don't know if she's asking like about doing an insulin reset where you try to go high fat, low carb to just kind of get a reset and on your insulin sensitivity. Cutting out any sort of food groups long term is never a good idea, in my personal opinion. Especially if you want to have a performance goal like powerlifting, bodybuilding, CrossFit, whatever it is, you have to have carbs for energy and to fuel for recovery and performance. So, not a great idea. Definitely not in the long term as well. And you got to think about what's sustainable. Carbs aren't the enemy.
Yes. Well, and
Um,
I think this leads into her second question too, which is moderation really key? Can you still keep in tasty stuff like pizza and burgers, but not on a
Mhm.
regular basis? I think the thing people think of carbs is they think of foods that are really easy to overeat. And that's usually
Mhm.
a combination of carbs and fats. If you think a
Mhm.
strict carb like a plain baked potato or, plain rice, you're not going to eat that. You're not going to overeat that many calories. It's when you add all the good stuff, the cheese, the bacon, the butter, the sour cream, all those things, the burgers, the pizza. It's the combination of both that it's hard to not overeat. But as long as you're aware of the calories you need to be eating and you're tracking accurately, you can definitely keep those in. It's just
Yeah.
that in competitive season, you're not going to have the budget for all of that. But in a lifestyle, it just depends on how many calories you have to eat, how often you can fit those in.
Yeah. And I
Yeah, we
mean, if you're doing like a 96% lean ground, Laura's lean ground beef burger,
hmm
that can fit in every day
Oh yeah.
at like 3 meals, really, because that's a lean protein and that's a burger. I mean, if you're doing like I have these pizza crusts that are basically it's like 100% chicken it's made out of. So I think it's like 35 grams of chicken. There are these little pizza crusts that's basically all of the calories come from chicken breast. And it's called like zero carb life. So if you're doing that with like some tomato sauce and some turkey pepperoni, some low fat cheese, you could probably eat that every day.
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to like, what's your budget? How are you spending your budget? You know, if you're doing it on stuffed crust cheese pizza that's, you know,
You're gonna be able
slathered
to
in
have like this
oil and
much, like a tiny
it's,
little piece.
yeah, I mean, you're going to be starving the rest of the day. If you have that one piece of pizza, it's going to
Yep.
spend your whole budget. So you just have to be smart about, where you're spending your macros and how accurately you're calculating them. But at the end of the day, if you're in a deficit, you could have pizza every day and burgers every day.
In theory,
All
yes.
about strategy, right?
I love it. Okay,
So,
so Mel had another question. What are key things you should look for on nutrition labels?
yeah, I think the biggest thing here is looking at the serving size and not being deceived by what the calories are saying, just taking that at face value, read the fine print, look to see how many servings is that many calories and, how many carbs, proteins, and fats. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just like what fits. Those macronutrients are super important to look at. And I mean, if you have any sort of like, if you're really trying to look at things that cause inflammation or things like that, you can look down at the ingredients of the nutrition label as well and just kind of look, you know, typically things with like one or a couple ingredients are a little bit better than things that have like 10 things that you can't even pronounce,
Mhm.
like different
Yeah.
chemicals. But those would be the main things I would be looking for on a label.
Yeah,
How
and
about
then
you?
I would check too if there are key buzzwords on, like if you're already looking at the label, you'll be aware of this, but a lot of
Mhm.
things like granola, they'll say protein granola, and you want to look at the
Yeah.
back, you want to see how many grams
Yeah.
are actually in there versus the serving size. That's a great one to look at. And then also the 2 grams of net carbs, you're going to want to look at how many carbs are
Mhm.
actually in there too. But I love looking at the serving size. That's great. Okay, and then one last question from Mel. What's the skinny on full fat, low fat, no fat? Which is better? Um, I love this because first of all, like over the top, it's what fits in your macros, you know,
Mhm.
and
Common
but
theme of today.
yeah, exactly. You got to be tracking, just make it fit.
What what
And
fits?
what you prefer, what's going to make it most enjoyable. So, like for me, I think of what I usually think of about full fat, low fat, and no fat is like I'll think of dairy products, and then I also think of salad dressings. That's another big one. And
Mhm.
with dairy products, for me, the difference between like a low fat and a full fat cottage cheese or Greek yogurt, the taste is just not really enough for me to, use my fat macros for that. I would rather
Mhm.
have a non-fat Greek yogurt and add some nuts on top or some peanut butter and
Yeah.
have that separate. If you don't really want to eat the peanut butter and you need to make up your fats, having a full fat dairy is totally fine. It's not bad for you.
Mhm.
And some people really enjoy that taste more. So that's, it's not bad. I love some good half and half in my coffee, so that's going to use up a couple of fat macros there. So it kind of just depends on where you want to put your macros. And then the one thing that I will say about things like salad dressings is when you take all the fat out of something, it's not going to taste very good. So you have to add something in to make it taste good. And so most low fat or non-fat dressings are going to have a lot of sugar in them, or, corn syrup or something like that. That's going to make them still taste pretty good. So I would just be aware that if you're taking all the fat out, it's probably going to be higher in carb. So just watch for things like that. I think that fat-free dressings taste gross. I would rather get like one of the spray dressings or use some vinegar or, balsamic vinegar or something like that on my salad versus having like a fat-free ranch that I just think doesn't taste very good. So just be
Yeah,
aware of that.
I think if you're doing, like you said, more of a vinegar-based salad dressing, I think you can go no fat and it won't take away from it because vinegar adds like a different element to a salad. So if you're looking for creamy, I totally agree with you that no fat is no fun in that situation.
Mm.
So, okay, let's go with Olivia, and I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but thank you for the question. Ways that you, I guess, weigh cooked meat. Example, do you trim chicken and weigh it differently prior to cooking, aka weighing it raw or after it's cooked? Okay.
I think
So,
what she's saying is she weighed her raw chicken pieces, but then she cooked them and she couldn't remember which piece was what after she
oh,
cooked
okay.
it. So it's like I don't know how to track this anymore because she's wanting to track it raw.
Okay. Yeah, I would say it's the easiest to just track it after it's cooked, but just make sure you're specifying that in MyFitnessPal. So you can look up meats in their raw form and then you can look at them in their cooked form. So it's just important to track the same way that you're doing it. Same with like sweet potatoes. So, to make it way more, things like fish, chicken, they get a lot of water into the meats to kind of like plump them up. So you just have to be careful because obviously once they get dehydrated from the cooking process, all that water is going to evaporate out. Same with like if you weigh a raw sweet potato and then you make that into like in the oven, you make chips out of it, it becomes really calorie dense because the raw weight of that original sweet potato, it now weighs almost nothing. And so it becomes very calorically dense. So just be careful, like when you do that, make sure that you're specifying the way that you're tracking is the way that you're measuring it. If that makes sense. I think that's the answer to your question, but I don't know.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Okay.
Okay, so Nicole Holmes, what are some of your favorite breakfast protein sources? I'm gonna
Yeah.
go classic here and say eggs. I love
Yeah.
doing a couple of hard-boiled eggs and oats for breakfast. It sticks with me. I wake up really hungry though, and I'm always hungry. If you're not super hungry in the morning, I would definitely say something like a protein shake is really good.
Yeah. I think we talked about our favorite breakfast sources
Okay, we
on the
did.
last podcast. So I think just thinking outside the box, like that you don't have to do traditional protein sources. So I have clients that will blend like egg whites and protein powder and like a little bit of oats and stevia and salt and like make a pancake out of it. Or they'll get like the mighty muffin, like little cups that are have 20 grams of protein where you pour water and put them in the microwave and it's like a little muffin that has a bunch of
Cool.
protein in it. Or um I think they make like brownies, like Bootylicious makes those little protein cups too. Different things like that. But I mean, think about like chicken sausage, chicken bacon, turkey bacon, pork bacon, all of those things. Those can be, because a lot of people have like aversions to eggs. So those are some thoughts there. You can always do like a protein Pop Tart, has like 20 grams of protein in it. And I think, it's important to think outside the box. I actually have been recently kind of sick of eggs. So I've been eating my protein ice cream with oats as my breakfast. So I'm having ice cream for breakfast. I mean, there's no rules about not doing that, right?
Have you
So
ever had Kodiak cakes? Like their power cakes?
those have gluten in them. So I try to avoid them a
Oh,
little
sure,
bit.
sure, sure. If you're not
Yeah.
sensitive to gluten and you love pancakes, if you get the Kodiak cake brand, but you got they have different ones. So again, check the
Yeah.
label. the power cakes that are high in protein, but that, especially if your breakfast is your pre-workout, they taste just like pancakes and they have a pretty good amount of protein and then, a good amount of carbs too. So you want to do it for like a pre-workout or if you're higher carbs in the morning too, but they
Yeah.
taste like exactly like real pancakes.
Yeah. And a lot of my clients like plain non-fat Greek yogurt in the morning. They do like a yogurt parfait with fruit, maybe a little granola. And then, you could always use low fat cottage cheese. I
Mhm.
mean, the sky's the limits when it comes, there's no rules. I mean, you can have whatever you want for breakfast. It doesn't mean you have to have a traditional breakfast.
I'll stick with my eggs. Okay, we got two more questions. We're almost done. So Jessica is asking, I love this question. What is your opinion of using artificial sweeteners such as stevia instead of sugar and their impact on health and fitness? I'm very passionate about this subject because I have a major sweet tooth and I live for stevia. When I discovered stevia, it made dieting so much easier for me. And I first
Yeah.
want to say that stevia actually is not an artificial sweetener. It is natural. It comes from a plant. So it comes from a stevia plant. There's usually some fillers in it. So if you're getting a brand that is, especially the powder, you want to look at what they're filling it with. Sometimes it'll be like with sugar alcohol or something like that to bulk it up. If you get the drops, it'll be more likely that it's pure stevia. But then your artificial sweeteners are going to be like your aspartame, your sucralose, and then you have, oh, I think there's another one that's, and I'm never sure if it's saccharin or saccharin or something like that. And then,
So they just did a recent study on this. And again,
yeah, I
I'm
was going to
referencing the
mention
Prep
that.
Life
Yep.
podcast again, but so I think of, sucralose is like Splenda, the yellow packet, and then
Yep.
you've got Sweet and Low, which I forget which one that is, but that's the pink
That's the
packet
pink one,
basically.
and that's aspartame, right?
Yeah, and then there's the blue packet, which is equal,
Mhm.
and then there's the green packet, which is stevia. So out of those four colors, the ones that they showed on a continuous glucose monitor with a really good study that just came out recently, is that the continuous glucose monitor noticed spikes in blood sugar for pink and yellow packets. So sweet and low and sucralose, it was the same spike in blood glucose as regular sugar, but stevia and equal, so the blue and the green packets, did not have a spike. Um, so although equal has some, other principles, like you said, stevia comes from an actual plant and a leaf, whereas equal is actually a chemical. Another one that I like is monk fruit because that is a natural occurring plant, but it 0 calories and it does add like a good flavor. Stevia, you have to kind of have a palate for it because it can be a little bit bitter, but I've gotten to love it,
Salt.
especially the ones with like vegetable glycerin.
If you add
What was
salt,
that?
salt with if you're using stevia,
Oh, you
uh,
kind of froze.
am I breaking up?
Oh,
Hi.
uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. So if you're
You
using
did for
stevia,
a second, but now you're back.
okay. Stevia or probably really any of the diet kind of sugars, the artificial ones, or monk fruit. If you use a little salt, it usually helps balance out the bitterness. And then they did a recent study that was kind of blew up about aspartame and how they had put it on the list of possible carcinogens. But there's a
Mhm.
lot of people that are kind of coming back and rebuttaling with the actual research. And I would look up Dr. Lee Norton had a really good video about it, and how the amounts that they were putting into these, test rats and
Rats.
stuff,
Yeah.
and the amounts that we're ingesting are perfectly safe. And we would have to be ingesting so much more than we do on a typical day to even have it be
Yeah.
possibly cancer causing. So I know that
Yeah.
that
It
was
was,
kind of a hot topic, and I don't know if that's why you asked that question, but as far as their effect on your health goes, unless you do have an allergy to them, I do have a friend that actually gets headaches if she ever eats stevia. So for her, yes, her body does not, process stevia right, but as long as you're not
yeah.
having adverse effects, they're perfectly safe in the amounts that you would normally ingest them.
One caveat to that, though, I would say is that I've noticed for myself and with clients that some of them get gut problems with like sucralose and too much of it.
Yeah.
It really disrupts like the gut microbiome. I don't know what it is about it, but you can have some dysbiosis and some gut issues with that. So be careful with that as well.
Yeah, definitely. On an individual, you got to learn your own body, which is why
Yep.
I think tracking everything is so, and keeping a food journal, logging your food is so beneficial. And then
Yep.
also I think with sugar alcohols, which is another, category,
Mhm.
that is a little bit more tendency to cause like bloating and gut issues and stuff too if you're eating a lot of it. So just to be
Yeah.
aware of that.
A lot of people get like gas and
Yeah,
gastric
not fun.
distress, fun
Okay,
stuff,
last
diarrhea.
question. Last question. Rapid fire. Your favorite low carb dessert with chocolate.
You go.
Okay, so I love chocolate, and I actually feel like it's really easy to go low carb after that last question, which is great. Is if you take the sugar out, if you replace it with something like stevia, you're taking out most of the carbs. You will have fats usually in chocolate. So if you're getting like a straight up chocolate bar, just check the fat, check the calories, make sure it fits. My favorite brand is Lily's. If you look up Lily's chocolate, it's all stevia sweetened chocolate. I love that. I
Mhm.
love just a good straight up chocolate. But then my other favorite super low calorie dessert to make, and I will make this all through prep too. It's so low calorie, is my hot chocolate. And it's just 1 cup or 8 ounces of unsweetened, like dairy free milk. So almond, cashew, something like that. And then I do 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder. I do stevia and salt. And then you want to blend it good in a bullet blender or with like a whisk or whatever, and then microwave it. So good. And it's like 45 calories. So that's mine.
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say, I mean, I like the sugar-free chocolate pudding. I I mean, that's very low calorie and low carb. If you're going that route, you can definitely make in the creamy, you can make chocolate ice cream that would taste delicious.
Okay.
Um, I think those, and I can't remember what the brand is, but it's like a brownie that's a chocolate brownie. Um, I can't remember the name of them, but they come in little packages. It's like a protein brownie. You know what I'm saying? Those are
No, but that sounds
those are
amazing.
really good. Yeah, we'll have to put like maybe in show
Yeah,
notes. I can't remember the name of the
we'll
brand,
post it. As soon as
but I
Amy
do
finds out,
like,
we'll post the brownie.
yeah, the Pop Tarts, the double chocolate Pop Tarts too from Legendary Foods are really good too.
Yeah, we live in a
Yep.
day and age where dieting is so easy. You just got to know where to look. So easy.
Hmm. Yeah,
So that
definitely.
is our dieting Q&A. If you were inspired listening to this episode and you thought of your own question, you can feel free to DM us on Instagram at Balanced Bodybuilding Radio. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave us a comment below with a question. We will answer it in a future episode. But until then, thank you so much for listening.
Bye.